Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first artist chat. My name is Scott James. I'm representing Solipsis Publishing. We're based in Seattle. And I am here with author Gar LaSalle, cover designer Neil Gonzalez, and medallion graphic designer Randy Mott. I'm not going to go too much into detail with what they do. I'll let them speak for themselves, but I'm really excited for us to take a few minutes or to take an hour or so to dig into what goes into designing an award-winning cover and what goes into designing a series of covers for a historical fiction series. So I'll start out by introducing Gar. Gar is an award-winning author. He's a filmmaker. He's a physician, a sculptor. He's a Renaissance man. He does quite a few things. And right now, he's putting the finishing touches on Book 3 of the Widowwalk Saga, and that's what we're here to talk about. Book 3 is called The Fairness of Beasts. And Gar, can you say a little bit about how you're writing, how you started writing, and then just tell us what you're working on right now?
Sure. The Widowwalk story actually began as a treatment for a screenplay. And I brought that to a producer friend, Nick Kazan, and he said, yeah, this is a really good story, Gar. It's a Miramax sort of film. But you know as well as I do, and I'd already written 6 other screenplays. They were spec, and he said, the likelihood of literally tens of thousands of spec scripts out there being written when there's only a couple hundred films that are coming out a year, this getting picked up, no matter how interesting the story is diminished, as you've already experienced. So he said, why don't you novelize this, and then at least you'll have a property. So I tucked it away, and then when I knew I was going to near retirement, I started doing some additional research in earnest about the events that are part of this story. It's a true story that happened in the Pacific Northwest in the mid-19th century, involving the most prominent citizen in that region when there were only about 5,000 non-natives in the area. And without spoiling the story itself, wrote the book and talked about the massacre, the events that occurred, and the story, but of the kidnapping, and it developed a very durable character. And it wasn't my intention really to continue writing. I was going to move on to other topics and things, but it turned out that several reviewers and people who read the book and liked it said, well, you're going to keep it going, aren't you? You've got a durable character here. And fortunately, I had left the ending open enough that I could do that. So from there, the second book came out, Isthmus, and that came up as a result of doing research about how the main character, the strong protagonist female, would move back to Boston, where her family was, and bringing the remains of her family back to Boston, to the East Coast, and discovered at that time that there was actually a railroad that had been constructed in 1855, and it was 47 miles of a railroad. It was the most expensive travel means in the world at the time. You paid $25 in gold to go one way per passenger, and $3 in gold per pound for your cargo, which would have included human cargo such as slaves. And I also discovered, as I did more research, that there was a culture called the Darien, who were the bandits who lived in the impenetrable Darien forest jungle that separates Colombia and Panama, that preyed on travelers. They for centuries, these were escaped slaves and other people who lived in the jungle, and they would attack the gold trains going across, first by the Spanish and then later as when gold was discovered on the West Coast in 49. Anybody moving to the West, as a matter of fact, Ulysses Grant almost got killed and lost about half of his party when he was moving across Pano before the railroad. So we put the main character, the protagonist, on that train with her family and had her experience the vicissitudes of a heist, so to speak. And then the third book, by that time I had decided I would create a saga out of this, and a 5-book saga. So that led then to the third book, The Fairness of Beasts. And the premise for all of these is what someone who is a person with good intelligence, equanimity, and devoted to the concept of doing the right thing, irrespective of the sociopathic behaviors around, whether it be individuals such as the ones we meet in the first and second book, or in a circumstance like war, which is what happened in the third book when sociopathic behavior is unleashed for all the reasons that people decide to kill each other in war, how she contends with that as well. And there'll be a 4th and a 5th book, and I'm doing some research, pretty heavy research right now on book 4, and the 5th book will take place as the main character comes full circle back to the Pacific Northwest, I think probably towards the end of the 19th century. And with that,
awesome.
As an introduction, when we did the first book, as I was writing it, I told you I went to an artist, physician artist, and whose work I respect, and he wanted to do some covers, and he did some renditions, and I took them to a group of people who I was testing, and even though they were interesting covers, most people said, "Oh, this is too scary," or whatever else. So then I tried my own version of a cover, and as a matter of fact, we go looking at the slides, you'll see where I dressed my wife up as the main protagonist, and put a pepper box pistol in her hand and a bundle of roses, which were symbolic things, and had her standing over the bluff of the landing where the events occurred in the first book. I just juxtaposed that, and I showed that to different people, and that people didn't think that worked either.
Sounds kind of amazing, though.
I think that was the best one of the group that you sent me.
Yeah.
And then I went to my editor. By that time, I had a good editor, and she introduced me to this fellow by the name of Randy Mott.
Yeah.
Randy did some renditions, and then we went back and forth on something that I was intrigued with, which was the Pacific Northwest native art, and in particular the Haida sculpture. The Haida tribe, which is in Haida Gwaii, did these incredible argillite, which is a very soft deep black stone. They create these incredible sculptures out of this place that's only found there. And I said to Randy, why don't we try to incorporate something from the totems that come from all of that and play with that? And then we unleashed Randy, and he did all this research on the Haida sculpture and the Pacific Northwest sculpture. And I have to put this into context because the Haida were blamed as being, in quotes, the Northerners, the Pacific Northwest version of Vikings who would sweep on down from the north and enslave people and decapitate them and all these other things that continued on until the British and the Americans brought in steam-powered gunboats to stop all of that. Nobody really knows who the Northerners were. It's been blamed on a variety of different tribes, and there's no written history from any of the tribes, so nobody really knows. But the behavior had to be contended with, and by the cultures coming in, both the Brits and the Americans, the internecine struggles that started up, and the confrontation between the cultures really precipitated lots and lots and lots of violence, and yet you've got this other side with the beautiful artistry of these people. So Randy took it from there.
Cool. Well, let me say a little bit about Randy, and then Randy, I'll let you talk about it because. Okay. But I know Randy is based in Austin, Texas. He's the founder of Mott Graphics, and he's been doing that for 25 years. At least he's won many awards. One that I think is pretty impressive also is that he was invited to lecture with Bill Moyers on Joseph.
That was actually, I wasn't invited to lecture. I did the design for the lecture, for the invitation. So
that's almost more powerful. Since so much
that was interesting though. That design got legs. It was just this simple, almost cave drawing type imagery that I did, and all of a sudden, all these people were talking about it, and I was perplexed. But it ended up being included. It won a PBS Advertising and Promotion Award. Yeah. It was included in the the Print Regional Design Annual. It was real successful, and it was just a simple, to me, just kind of a simple design. But
as many of the great mythological symbols are. Well, that's sort of a brief background, but Randy, can you talk a little bit about what you do day to day? And
well, I'm a graphic designer and illustrator. I think like an illustrator. So most of my graphic design centers around an illustration. And that's what I've been doing for, I think my first job was in '86. So what is that, 30 years? But along the lines, I've also, I was a adjunct professor at our local community college for 20 years. That job recently got legislated out of existence. So my class was no longer taught, so I stopped teaching that. And in the past, I guess, 4 years, I've started designing and fabricating and selling jewelry, mainly rings. And I'm doing acid etching right now, and eventually get into casting and that sort of thing. But that's pretty much me. I'm freelance, work out of my house, as you can see behind me. And hopefully the dogs won't start barking or anything like that. But that's me. That's what I do day to day.
Awesome.
Randy, it's funny you mentioned that you taught at ACC, and I realized, I took a Photoshop class at ACC.
Oh, yeah?
Back in 2001 or 2.
I would have been teaching then.
I could have, for all we know, been your student.
Maybe so. I don't think so though, because I don't necessarily remember names, but I remember all of the faces.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
I barely remember it, but I know it was a helpful class.
Well, you would have remembered my class on
it. Yes.
So, but yeah, and then as far as my relationship with Gar, I did the first book cover. I actually did the first book cover design, but and then in the reprint, Neil did that, and I think Neil's is a lot better. I'm still proud of mine though, but to me it just doesn't fit on being an illustrator, and it was real dark and kind of foreboding looking. But I did the first book cover design, and actually what Gar didn't mention is when he went to me, I did 4 designs that he did not like. I sent them all at once, though. It wasn't like I did a design and no, I did a design and no. I sent him 4 designs, and I remember getting an email back. Actually, I keep all of my emails, so I was able to go back and kind of refresh my memory too. Mm-hmm. But I got an email back from Gar saying, "This is not what I had in mind. Let's talk." And so I don't remember the conversation, but I saw another email after that said, and this is something you never want to hear, and it was, "Well, let's give this one more try." And that was when Gar actually came up with the idea of the carvings. And he sent me this kind of just a rough mock-up of a cover that I think you have that you can show in a little bit, and the rough mock-up of the cover. And I had never heard of the, is it Haida or Haida?
Haida.
Haida. I'd never heard of the Haida Indians. I vaguely remembered seeing kind of that style of art, but when I started researching it, it just kind of it kind of spoke to me. I just did tons and tons of research and started coming up with designs, and it was one of these things where I found it kind of easy to draw that type of design. So it was real fun to come up with.
That's cool.
Come up with that. It was a lot of fun to create the artwork too, not just
nice
coming up with the design.
Well, I know we're going to take a look at some of those the 4 rejected covers.
Okay.
The 4 first draft covers, we'll call them. But first, I want to. Oh, go ahead.
No. I was going to say we'll wait until we see the ones that came before it, and then it won't look so bad.
Yeah, totally. Okay. Well, I just want to introduce Neil Gonzalez, who is. What's the official title? Are you the art director at Greenleaf Book Group?
Art director at Greenleaf Book Group. I've been the art director for 1.5 to 2 years now. Mm-hmm. And I've been here for 10 years. I started as a junior designer, and then I kind of worked my way up, and now 10 years later, I'm the art director. So I'm pretty proud of what I've done here at Greenleaf, and I love this company, so I just want to keep at it.
Nice. Well, Neil's designed many covers that have made it to many different bestseller lists. He's being modest right now. And he didn't just happen to move up. Clearly, he's a master of his craft. So it's pretty awesome that he's been able to work on all 3 books in the series so far, and I assume we'll finish out. So this is the team, Gar, Randy, and Neil. And the first cover that they put together did win the USA Booksellers Award. Is that the correct name, Gar?
USA Best Book Awards cover.
USA Best Book Award in the cover category. And so these guys know what they're doing. That's what we'll say. But what we want to dig into is how they made it happen. So let's take a look at that. Gar, I'm going to pull up a few of the early images, and maybe if you can say, revisit, where everything came from.
Sure. That particular slide that you're seeing there is actually a video clip at the beginning of a video clip from a Edward Curtis film called "In the Land of the Headhunters," later politically correct changed to "The Land of the." I can't remember where they took the headhunters off of there, but it's a chilling depiction that was done in about 1917 or so with Haida people in one of their major longboats, dressed in their costumes as the raven and as the bear. And when I first saw that back in 1960, it just scared the hell out of me.
Yeah.
It's really very, very interesting. And of course, its photographs are amazing as well.
Yeah, so, we'll post that video on the show notes for sure, and people can make their own decision if they want to get freaked out by the real life Northerners or not.
So you go to the next slide. That's a blockhouse that still exists on Whidbey Island that was built around the time of the massacre. There's about 4 blockhouses that still exist, and if you look at them, they all have plaques that say these were built to withstand the attacks by the Northerners. The protagonist family in this circumstance didn't have the attack occurred on their own house. At any rate. So, and this is the plateau where the events occurred, and in the distant background at the base of the trees is the house where that was attacked. This is an alluvial plain that is the most fertile area on probably in the Pacific Northwest, the soil is deep, rich, and black. And as time went on, the family discovered arrowheads and a number of other things that were artifacts from tribes that lived in that area for thousands of years. And it's considered a haunted area. It's a national preserve now, and this view is taken from the cemetery where Isaac is buried. His headless remains are buried, and it is said that if you go up on that graveyard at night, on moonlit nights, you can actually see a ghost walking across. Local islanders consider this a beautiful haunted area.
Yeah. So for people who are not familiar with the Pacific Northwest and Seattle in general, this is an island off the west coast of Seattle, or off the west coast of Washington. Is that correct?
It's in Puget Sound.
Got it.
And so it's not on the coast itself. It's an inland coast.
Perfect.
That's the cemetery. That's the view of where Isaac is buried. Not with the wife that we tell the story about. It's with his first wife. There's an interesting backstory that I can relate at some other time in terms of what happened to the real Emmy, who is the hero of our story.
Got it.
And that's Isaac. We changed his name.
This is the real life character that the
real life character.
Yeah.
And for a while, he was being touted as being the next governor of the state, and until the events occurred, of course. We started playing with graphic imagery, and we're actually, someone suggested this would be a great graphic novel. What you consider that. So I sent this off to Carrie Pelto, who's the physician artist that I was telling you about, and we started playing with concepts, and frankly, the book still, I think, could turn into a graphic novel as well, because it's structured appropriately from that standpoint. This is art from the era, so we played with that. And this is some renditions that he did, that the bear attack against Emmy and her daughter in the first book, and the next one shows, I think, a longboat. The only problem I had with that one is that it looked like the head that the antagonist is carrying is Velcroed to his hand. But apart from that, that's a pretty accurate depiction of what the longboats look like.
Wow.
Look at that. Like, would that be an alligator or a lizard on the side? That's beautiful.
Probably. I don't know which particular animal that is. They didn't have alligators up there, but they did.
It could be a whale. Could be a killer whale.
A whale, yeah.
They had a lot of killer whales up there. They're plentiful.
Very cool.
I like that.
And this is the first book cover that Carrie did.
Okay.
I like this a lot. However, the test group that I had about 30 or 40 people who said it was just too scary. You had the Aboriginal figure in the foreground, and then a bunch of heads on stakes. And that's probably pretty accurate about what was occurring back then, but it was probably wouldn't get people to pick the book up. So we passed on that one.
Okay.
And then this is the one that I tried with my wife. That's my.
Right.
We dressed her up into something that resembled what Emmy would have worn. And in her right hand is a pepper box pistol, which of course is important to the story, and a bundle of white roses, which are also symbolically important because it is a love story as well as a thriller.
I like that, by the way. I think there's a lot of potential there, just composition-wise.
Mm-hmm.
Where we juxtaposed her image and projected that onto the plateau where the events actually occurred, and that curving there is the Eevee Plateau on Whidbey Island, where the Haida landed, or whoever the Northerners were landed, and night attacked the family.
Yeah. Well, I just want to reiterate for people who are watching, like this, these are the first two, here's some concepts that Gar was playing with some different artists. Here's the first version, another version, and this is how covers start. Is that fair to say, Neil?
Yeah, usually it starts with an idea and then rough sketches and loose compositions, such as we have here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, not being a visual person myself, I think anybody who looks at, a finished book cover or a work of art that's on a wall, you typically think like, wow, that person is so talented. They just made that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's never the case. It's, these were what, months, maybe a year before you had the finished one, Gar?
Yeah, I'd say probably about 9 months.
So that's pretty, it's revealing, and it's almost more impressive than thinking someone can just sit down and bang out a perfectly finished book cover or any work of art. But I always find it fascinating how all over the map the original visuals are compared to what makes the final cover. Okay.
This is one of my own sculptures. That's basalt, which that's a huge piece of stone. It took me 2 years to finish that. But I'm very much impressed with the Haida sculpture in particular, and I like that sort of work. As a matter of fact, Haida sculpture inspired me to do this. So if you go on, I'll show you some pictures of the argillite. That's one of my other sculptures. That's a clay version before we did the bronze.
Mm.
The next one is a piece of argillite, and you can see that the artist started working on that. The argillite is a shale. When you soak it in water, it softens and it absorbs water enough that you can carve into it. And it's hard to get big pieces of it. Most of the pieces are, 2 to 6 inches in size. I was telling Randy about something that happened, unfortunately, to the only place you can get the argillite is up on Haida, Guay. And it's guarded as a treasure by the Haida people, of course. Next slide will show you a picture of one of their.
Oh, yeah.
That's what I showed that to Randy, and it's typical of the very stylistic, beautiful stuff that's all built. There's storytelling built into it. A lot of symbolism using the animals that were important to them, which is the raven and the other animals, the killer whales, the hawks, and all the other things that they. And this stuff was collected starting in the the early 1700s all over the world. There's an incredible exhibit of it up at the Victoria National Museum.
Cool. Well, Randy, had you ever seen Haida art before? What did you think when you saw that?
I had not, but something that's really interesting is that I'm really interested in Viking art and Celtic art. And you would see the similarities when you start looking at it. And it's funny when Gar was talking about the Northerners going in and raiding, that there were these violent people, but they had this beautiful art. That's exactly the Vikings. They were the Northerners. They were going on raiding.
Interesting, yeah.
Really rich, beautiful artwork. I don't know if there's some connection or not, but it's interesting.
Yeah, maybe that's a shared characteristic of someone who lives in a northern climate.
Or that someone who's really violent also tends to be a good artist. So I don't know.
Yeah, that's even more fun to think about. How about you, Neil? What was your exposure to Haida art, or just, I don't know, Pacific Northwest traditions?
Yeah, I feel like I've seen it before somewhere. I'm not quite sure where. I wasn't overly familiar with it, but definitely impressed by how beautiful it is. And I love it. And it turned out great in the final piece, as we'll get to.
Cool. Oh, here's more examples of the same tradition, Gar.
Yeah. So then,
there we go.
Then I this is another Randy and I were talking about it. And, so I pulled a picture up of a totem. This piece is actually about 15 inches high. And I said, let's try something with high contrast to it. It brings out the rich blacks in this stuff and the highlights, and play with something like that. And then Randy took it and ran with it from there.
Yeah, I think this was I think when you sent this to me, that was my introduction to the style of the Haida style. And then I still remember finding, just going through and just looking at as much stuff as I possibly could to try to get the symbolism, try to get the shapes in my head. Because I didn't want to copy stuff.
Yeah,
I wanted to do it in that tradition, that style. And so I just looked at as much, I don't know how many hours of research I did, but I just kind of filled my head with those images. And so that I could go and start creating the actual shapes.
Does anything stand out to you, like after immersing yourself in the shapes and the stories and what did you say, the raven being a prominent image? Anything stand out as a really cool discovery? For
me or for Gar?
For you, or for either of you.
Well, with me, it was more just the visual richness and I love things that interlock and have symbolism in them. And that was kind of the amazing thing, how the fluidity of it, how all of the shapes and the different characters interlock. And when my first shot, and I think you're going to see that the covers didn't do that. And then Gar, who is amazing to work with, and always kind of pulls out my absolute best work. He'd say, no, let's do this. So maybe we should do this. And by the time it was done, I'd achieved that. And I really don't think I would have if I hadn't had Gar's input on it. It was really great.
Very kind of you say that, Randy. A comment about this is that I'm intrigued with the concept of storytelling. And if you don't have a written tradition, then you do it in a different way. And these totems speak to something that is symbolic of the people in a clan, where they're positioned. The animals themselves are symbolic, and people identify with them in terms of the nature of the animal from that standpoint and correlation. So that's where we started to go with all of this.
Got it. Okay, here we go.
And this was another cover, and Randy, I don't remember. Did you send me this medallion? Or
I sent you that. I found this, and I thought, this shape really lends itself to the. I liked the idea of the type of artwork. I wasn't crazy about that real vertical totem. And I found this, and I thought, for a cover, this might be really, really cool. So yeah, I sent you this. I remember finding this and thinking, oh, that's really nice.
So I incorporated that into this, and then I sent it out to some of the test people again, and they said, wow, this is really beautiful. This is incredible. Because the story that's built into those characters there, you see the longboat and all the other things like that. So, so then we went in that direction.
So what are we looking at here?
I think it's not the first one, I don't think. Or was it the first one that I did? Might have been.
We talked about, Randy, who reads the books very carefully, came up with the notion that each one of these characters have a symbolic. Each one of the characters in the book, the main characters have there's some symbolism attached to that. So what you have here are the dominant main characters centered around a two-headed bird, one side of the bird being a dove and the other side being a hawk. That's the Emmy character. You have on the upper left the beaver, which is her husband who is murdered. To the upper right, you have the eagle, a prototypical eagle, which is the George Edward Pickett, who was stationed up there later to become famous at Gettysburg. who there was a quasi-romantic relationship between him and his wife. To the lower left, you have the raven, which is the archetypical sociopathic character who's leader of the clan that attacks the settlers. And to the lower right, you have the kidnapped child, a little Wolverine, who's a ferocious little boy. Goes after. So this was Neil's first, Randy's first iteration of that.
Got it.
Yeah, I think one thing I remember is with that one that you liked it, but you wanted them to be interacting, the characters to actually be interacting.
Yeah.
All right, and that's so. What did you do? Was that the transition from this one to here?
Yeah, that was the transition from that one to here. And as I recall, Gar, this one you and I absolutely agree. After you saying it and looking back at it, it just looked like they were all just attacking that central figure, and they shouldn't be. One of them was, but the other ones were trying to protect them. So that just didn't kind of work in there.
So rather than attack, looks like here's another variation on them dancing.
That's where we came up with the two-headed hawk, and because the ME character is a person who is she is trained to be a woman and subservient, but really she has a steel backbone, just like the women who did survive during that time, and that comes out, and what brings it out, of course, is what is most dear to her after the attack, which is trying to retrieve her son, where she can't get help from either the Americans or the British military on this.
Okay, this I'm starting to recognize as very close to what was on the cover.
That's actually taken off of the cover. That looks like the finished thing. And I don't remember. Did you suggest the boat, Gar, or did I?
I can't remember, Randy.
Because I think I was trying to. I think I saw something that had a boat, and I was trying to make this, to where it could stand alone as a disc shape. And I think I saw a carving that had a boat in it. And I thought, that would really kind of help to tie everything together. And that's how I ended up coming up with this.
It also follows the story closely.
Yeah.
Well.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
It's spectacular, actually. So then, go ahead, Randy.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I was really. That was one of the every once in a while I'm doing something, and as it's coming together, it's like, this is really nice. I can't believe I'm doing this. And it's just things were just like working out, and it was fun because this is, I had no reference. This was just kind of starting from scratch and building this out of my head, and I was real happy with the way that turned out.
Yeah, that's pretty stunning, and it's interesting, going through all these elements and the boat, where whoever's idea it was, or however it made its way into this medallion. It reminds me of the one where I was asking, is that an alligator or whatever, and you said whale. But it's fun to see that element come in here. Yeah. And I also think it's pretty notable that there is no center, so to speak. Like you said, that one of your first designs, there wasn't, it felt like everybody was attacking the face in the middle. And I think that's pretty striking that you made a round design.
It looks symmetrical, but it's not.
Yeah. And they're really, there is a center, but there's not like an image, right, dead center.
This was the first iteration of the book cover, and this next slide shows the front and back. We incorporated the roses, and put a map in there because most people don't know the geography of the Pacific Northwest. So Randy built the mapping in, as it was then, as we understood it, and this is where all the events occurred. On the left side of, on the back cover, you see the Puget Sound area where Whidbey is.
Got it.
And then Vancouver Island, where a lot of the events occurred. And then up to the far left, you see Haida, where then called the Queen Charlotte Islands, where the antagonists live. And then across the channel from there is where Emmy had to go to try to retrieve her son. So we built all that into that. And I thought it was gorgeous, but then when Greenleaf picked it up, they said, "You're going to scare people away. This is too dark." So that's where we started changing the imagery. But
Okay.
we wanted to keep the medallion in there for sure.
Yeah. Well, can you speak to that, Neil? I don't know if you were part of the assessment that this was a little dark.
I wasn't, but I was lucky enough to be assigned to this project.
Got it.
And at that point, that's where I familiarized myself with everything. We do see the previous iteration of the cover, and you know, there's definitely a lot of potential with that medallion. It's beautiful, and it's pretty much the main focus. So once I started talking to Gar and reading the manuscript, you know, the medallion made so much sense that we definitely had to keep it, and it just worked well. I think it was everything else was thought about how to accentuate the medallion and still keep it as a main focus. So at that point, I familiarized myself. I read the book. I took it home, and I really enjoyed it. It's great when I get to work on great novels. I feel lucky to do so. So that's part of the beginning of my process is I'll familiarize myself with the manuscript and read as much as I can to get like a sense of tone and main characters and in symbolism, anything that can help me along the design visually. So at that point, and I talked to Gar and we discussed some ideas. I introduced myself and did all that. And at that point, that's where I do a lot of image research. So basically, I use different stock photography websites.
Yep.
And it's efficient that way because we don't just focus on one design. We provide several options. So I can't just do a custom illustration and do custom photography for one idea because we're working on a deadline, and it's just focusing on one takes too long. So we have to use stock photography, which is completely fine as long as you use it in a way. I particularly like to combine images into one new image. That way, just the components are stock, but as a whole, it's unique. And that's kind of my method to get around the stockiness of it, where everyone has access to these images.
Yeah.
And that's a type of design style I really like to do, is kind of a collage-based design. As you'll see with the rest of the books in the series, it kind of got more collagey and almost digital illustrated, which is something I really like to do.
Do we have examples of those in, like, is this one?
Yeah, that's one of them, of the comps I sent.
Okay.
Did you have any more? Because I have them if you don't.
I'll hand it to you. Why don't you do it?
4 of them, I think, actually.
Yeah, so let me...
Oh, it looks like I do have them.
Okay, well, I have some extra ones that I might not have included and Gar might not have even seen.
Okay.
So
I'll give it to you. Why don't you show us what you have?
Just a comment too, Greenleaf was great about this and very, very supportive in developing the author's platform and a lot of the things that were part of that. And then their art process, when I got introduced to Neil on that, was very helpful because of the conceptual approaches to all of this.
Yeah, and I appreciated the work that had been done before. Is definitely a lot of positive aspects of it. So I was just trying to see if I can enhance it. So and this is one of the rounds I came up with. I don't know if that's showing. Can you see that?
Yep.
Okay. So here's 6 comps. 2 I include in the first round, so I don't believe Gar ever saw him. That bottom middle one was kind of just a redo of what Randy had done, because I did like it. And I think that we all agreed it was too dark, you know, so that immediately told me don't include it. But I did like explore keeping that option, and there's really no contrast. It's more subtle. The medallion doesn't stand out as much. But then, you know, in learning about the story itself, the whole boat ride stuck out, and that led me to like kind of using that as one of my main concepts. So the bottom right one is like the canoe, and there's the reflection of Emmy in the water, and she's kind of contemplating. So she can either be beginning the journey or had just arrived wherever she was. And once you have a solid concept that you decide you're going to spend the effort to create, you know, then that's where like the execution has to happen, like color and type, and there's the other components that go along with more than just the concept. So there's the concept and idea is one thing, but then it's like how you bring it together. I really like the bottom right one, using the kind of complementary colors with the blue and orange and some yellow. Like I could definitely see that being picked. And with this first round, like I love doing what I've envisioned is the best for it. And then that sometimes can surprise the author, and it might be something they didn't expect or never would have guessed. So it's always a fun time, and it's kind of nerve-wracking because you don't know how they're going to respond to your vision. And obviously they know the story the best. So the other options, like the top right one, I don't believe I included that, but it was more focusing on the settlement. And that's one of the things working on any historical fiction is those details. So the bottom right one with the canoe, I'm pretty sure that's not like authentic, and it's more of the idea I'm trying to convey, but I don't have access to that authentic type of canoe, and if I did, it probably wouldn't be at that angle, you know, so it wouldn't possibly look the best in this composition. So that's one of the trade-offs you have to do, and I've learned that you can't focus on those details, and that's the tricky thing, because a lot of the stock websites don't have these authentic photos. So that's the trickiest thing, and that's why I tend to pull out and not focus on those details. And then having the beautiful medallion, like that is the main focus, and I learned that's what the focus should be, that in itself. And that kind of led us to the top left one, which was the one that eventually got used. It's just setting the scenery and showing the geography of the Pacific Northwest, and that is authentic. And that's the great thing. Like you can't tell. There's no details to get hung up on. It's just a beautiful shot.
Yep.
And
show a close up of those. If you go back to the other slide set, so that people what Neil's talking about there.
Yeah, Scott, if you want to do that,
sure.
Take over.
I think that the interesting thing here is very, very clear that Neil, like Randy, had read the book carefully, and they both keyed in on certain themes. And all right, so there you've got the boats in the water, and there were two boats, etc. And you've got something up on the top. And what were you thinking there, Neil, when you did that particular rendition?
I don't know if I did the version that was chosen first or second, but I came across the boat journey. So I thought that was a good idea. So I didn't want to just stop at one option. You know, I like to expand on a good idea. So I basically just did another version, and then have the composition be split where the focus is on this woman who is the main character and wearing a gown that I felt could be authentic possibly. And then the you know, it's just a beautiful photo. So I was lucky to use that. But then you pair it with the actual journey of the boat ride. And I think that, like, by doing that, you know, you kind of realize what's working and what's not. I didn't really have the best place to use the emblem. I think it works as is, but it probably could have been just as strong without it, you know, but we already agreed to use it. So I kind of had to put it somewhere. And then knowing there's like Native American characters, and to me, it felt very much so in that Native American kind of story. So using these kind of tan and taupey colors, to me, brought that side of it out without explicitly showing a Native American, you know. And that's the tricky thing with covers also. You want it to be eye-catching, but you can't tell every aspect of the story, you know. You kind of want to boil it down to one topic or idea you'd like to showcase, and then make that beautiful and good looking if you can. And that's a lot. Some authors want to like cram every detail and aspect of the story and basically tell the story visually on the cover, and that usually isn't a good idea. You know, it's better to like focus on one aspect and go from there. But here I kind of split it into two aspects. So I don't know. I can't remember if I added those boats or not. I know I did on the final piece. I think I might have added those, photoshopped them. So like, yeah, I can't really remember, but that was the idea of like adding that small detail. And the fact that they're silhouettes, you know, you can read that it's a boat canoe ride, but you don't know exactly who's in it and what's going on. And I think that provides some of the intrigue that I try to incorporate.
I did a test group with about 40 people on these 4 covers. And if you go to the next one, that one was chosen number 2 because it was mysterious and it pulled people into it. And you have the image of the woman in the water. And then the next one shows. So Neil, talk about that one too, because you're obviously honing in on a particular scene in the story. So
yeah,
what was your thought there?
It's, again, I like to show the main characters either at a distance or with their backs turned. I kind of learned it's never, we don't prefer to show the faces of people. It just gives away too much detail, and reading something in words, it's always good to have the reader imagine their own character, what they might look like. It's good to include adjectives and descriptions, but I typically don't like to show people's faces. So, and it's more of just like getting the feeling of what you're looking at. So it's a woman in a field, and in the distance is a man on a horse, or it could be a person on a horse. And that was just showing this distance between these two people. There's obviously some type of connection, and it's more mysterious. You don't know quite what that story is in between these people. So I was hoping that that would intrigue people to find out more about these characters. And again, using the same, or a setting of the area. And it's fun when you look at landscapes, photos, beautiful photos of landscapes. Like, it will trigger an idea. And I look through hundreds of images, pretty much spend all day looking at it, and it's fun to find what could work. And sometimes that like leads to another idea you might not have thought of. And I think just the beautiful like field with that yellow gold color kind of led me to this composition and color. So
got it.
Yeah.
That speaks to a particular scene at the end of the book where Emmy is waiting for up on San Juan Island during what was known as the Pig War between the Brits and the Americans, and she goes up after everything has effectively been resolved and searches out Pickett again. And there is a quasi-romantic relationship that's there, strained and very platonic in many respects, but still erotic in some sense. But it told only one aspect of the story, which is probably the reason the people who had read the book liked this, but didn't say that they wanted to go in that direction.
Sure.
And then we have the one that, is this exactly the final cover, or this is just sort of the precursor?
No, that's it.
Pretty close, yeah, that might be it.
Yep.
And it's the same thing, using the similar color palette, these taupey, tan, kind of muted, desaturated colors. And then there's this beautiful sunset, and it's kind of, the reflection in the water is bringing some focus into these canoes. And they're so small, like you might not see them immediately, but I do like that when there's some subtle details that you look closer and you can actually realize what's happening. This one, it's more about the beautiful shot of this landscape, the mountains, the sunset. I believe I did add some of that pink hue color more so, and that's what's fun to me. If there's a beautiful photograph of mountains such as this, I can like accentuate some of the details and just like bring it out a little more by like making that sunset even more beautiful. And of course, like, I respect the original photographer's image, but you know, for using it in a cover, like I have that, I like to have the ability to like just like further accentuate it while like retaining the beautifulness of it.
Yeah, and even though I've looked at this book and held it and read it myself, you know, multiple times, it didn't strike me until right now that the map is in, you know, relief in the background.
Yeah.
And it makes me think of, Randy, the cover that you did, the original one, and just how, you know, sort of the top half, I guess, is very reminiscent of the elements anyway.
I carried that over because I was definitely working from when Randy introduced it, and
that's cool.
Randy mentioned how that came about.
Right? Yeah, it was intended. I mean, I think what Gar asked was just to have a map on the back, and when I did the front, there was something missing, so I decided to just go ahead and pull that. I like to add texture, and to me, the map on the front was just texture. And it was just a continuation. The hard part is I drew those maps.
Oh, wow.
And to draw, I don't know how many hundreds of miles to wrap around.
That's that illustration that you're talking about. You're a graphic designer, but
yeah. And you know, and you can't find a map that is going to work for what we wanted to do on the back. So I had to draw them. And but it was a lot of fun to kind of come up with the technique, because I did them in a program called Illustrator, and I've always liked doing stuff in something like that and make it look like it wasn't done that way, make it look like it was done by hand. But yeah, it was a lot of fun to do. But yeah, I did the whole front part of that map just for texture.
Got it.
You know, in the first run, I might also mention that they embossed the medallion so that it was, the sculptural aspects of it came out. It was really, really quite beautiful.
So on the book, you could feel the texture of the medallion. Yeah. The other little element too, and Neil, tell me if this was intentional, the line between widow and walk feels a lot like the design from the whale on the canoe. Yeah,
there's that connection, and that diamond pattern just reminded me of the Native American aspect. I know, like, not the whole book is not centered around Native Americans, but you know, there is a part of it in there. So that was one of the little details I tried to incorporate that made that connection.
Yep.
Without explicitly showing, you know, like spelling it out and beating you over the head with it. It's sort of more of a subtle nod to some of the setting and characters, and the medallion, of course.
Love it.
But yeah, and then that type of thing is what kind of makes the look and feel that you can carry over as a series. Those type of little details are a great thing to bring to the next books, So you can make that visual connection between all of them. And obviously like the font you use. So basically you're kind of setting yourself up for a look and feel that will be used throughout the series.
Nice.
And another detail I like to do, with the type, it's fun, and this type's, it's funny looking back at your work, you're always overly critical. But one of the fun things I did on the word walk, I made it the same type of dark brown, almost black color as the medallion, so again, have that type of connection. And then I try to kind of give it a subtle light source on the bottom, the little gradient coming from the sunset. So almost as if it's like above the mountains in the sky, literally. So there's a kind of like subtle interaction, and it just looked nice aesthetically, but then there's also like a kind of interaction between that. And that's probably something that a common person glancing at it might not pick up on, but it's a subtle detail as a designer I like to incorporate, and I think it kind of makes it feel as a unit. And
right.
Yeah, I was going to mention that, and what I was going to ask too is, I know that there was reflected light in my medallion. Did you add more, or is that just kind of a happy accident that it looks like it's also picking up that sunset?
I think it was a happy accident because I noticed in the original version of it, it had those nice highlights, and it's a great idea for you to add that because, being one color, it could have a flatness to it, but you definitely brought out that relief with the shadows and highlights, and that's like brilliant on your end.
Thanks.
So
it really ties it all together the way you did that reflected, that kind of backlighting with the glow coming up. I was going to mention that because it ties the whole thing together. It's really nice.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it worked out well, and it's great to have your talent, and I'm able to take advantage of that. So it worked out, and I didn't mess with the medallion. It's beautiful as is, and this composition, the first thing you look at is the medallion. And especially on that first run, I love watching people holding their hands and put their hand over the medallion and be impressed with that. So it really turned out well, I thought.
Yeah. Cool. That's fascinating. So about a 9-month journey from the first set of ideas to something like this, where people are, impressed by touching it. And there's literally shades of interaction between all the elements. That's really cool.
It got people to pick up the book. And it won awards. It accomplished the purpose that we're trying to achieve here.
Yeah. So that's how you do it. Well, I think we're moving along in our time together, gentlemen. Do you want to touch on the Fairness of Beasts cover that is currently about to be wrapped up, or do you want to spend some time on Isthmus? Gar, what are you thinking?
I think we should show the Isthmus stuff, and we can, Scott, we could break this into 2 parts if you want.
Yeah, sounds good. Well, as long as you guys are good to continue, let's talk about Isthmus.
Okay.
All right, Gar, set the scene again.
Okay, this is the Isthmus of Panama, separated by Costa Rica and Colombia, and right there in the middle between Panama City and Colón was a river called the Chagres, and off to the right, where you see the word Panama, is the Darien jungle, which is still to this day impenetrable. And they built a railroad 50 years before they created the canal, and it was 47 miles, and still was prey to bandits until the railroad brought in a ex-Texas Ranger by the name of Rand Reynolds, who hunted down these people and killed them all. So that's the story in a nutshell, and the interaction of our family with that within that setting.
Great.
And this is just a picture of the natives. These are the Darieni, who were escaped slaves, and they still dress up and have a festival called it's called the Dias de Diablos, which is the Day of the Devils. Next slide will show you a picture of how one of the costumes that they do. This is a devil. Their face opens up after someone's
Wow.
holy water on them, and they become a human being again. And in Nombre de Dios and the towns where for the endpoint for the Spanish gold trains that were preyed upon by the Brits and their buccaneers. The Spanish conquistadors were not very well thought of, and so every year they have a festival where these devils who represent the Spanish fight against the mestizo people, and then the priest comes and throws holy water on the devils, and then they split and become human beings and then disappear into the night. It's just, anyway, that's the culture. There's a lot of voodoo built into all of that as well. Anyway, this is what the railroad depictions look like back then. This is an actual graphic, something that was published, and that's what the trains look like. And continue on. So Randy,
okay,
I want to talk a little bit about this. This is where we brought Randy in about the medallions again.
Yeah, as I recall, you had seen a museum exhibit that you sent me a link to, and it was of artifacts of the tribes that lived during the period. And once again, kind of like with Widow Walk, I just went through and found out as much as I could about pre-Columbian art. And started seeing these basically embossed gold, and some of them are copper. They're breastplates. There's particular ones where they would, I guess, hang them in front of themselves. But and they weren't always round. Some of them were square. And the first design that I actually did was square. I have those if y'all want to see them.
Yeah, put those out.
Yeah.
I'll give you the screen.
Okay.
Or I'll stop and then you can grab it. Yeah.
There we go. I only have this one. I think went a little bit easier than Widow Walk did, as far as let me make sure I've got the right screen here. That's not the right screen. You do it this way.
There you go.
Are y'all seeing it? Okay.
Yeah.
So that's not it. There we go. That was the first sketch that I did.
I see.
And we actually were trying to do a similar thing with that we did with Widow Walk, and that was represent the main characters in the medallion.
Sure.
And so in this case, Bocamalo is that main character, but he's also the snake, isn't he, Gar? Or the serpent?
He's fighting with something that is within him, which is the serpent. And
right. And then Emmy's the character at the bottom. And I can't remember the two other main characters.
This is the warrior who's off to the right. He's the major who's pulled out of retirement. And then to the left is the doctor that kind of falls for Emmy.
Right, and he's holding, actually, it's a surgical instrument, I believe.
Scalpel, yeah.
Yeah, but and then the birds and the smaller ones represented the children, but I think we ended up taking those out. And I've actually got the next one here, and this is when, and actually I don't remember this, but I saw it in the email. I'd switched to. Try this. There we go. I got rid of the children and switched to a disc shape because everything would fit in there better. And then also we switched to a three-headed snake or serpent, and it's because Gar wanted it to represent the kind of three different personalities of Bokomalo. And I know one was anger, one was lust. I don't remember what the third one was.
Pain.
Yeah, that's the one that he's got his hand around his neck. But and so this was the next one, and the problem with it was kind of really too busy right in the middle. We couldn't tell what was going on, and so we ended up with that one, and that was pretty much the final drawing design. And then I think that that's the last slide that I have. I think the next one that you have, Scott, is the actual finished illustration for the medallion.
Okay, let's go back over to that.
The female character at the bottom, the Emmy character stepping on the tail of the serpent, plays on the notion of a theme you see in a lot of different archetypical art, and particularly Christian art, where the Madonna is standing on the serpent's tail. It's where we had that coming in.
Very, very cool. Okay. Neil, you want to talk about working with this medallion?
Oh, I need to stop my share, don't I?
Yeah, so then kind of the same process happened again. Read as much as the book as I could, and then talked to Gar, got some ideas, did the image research, and sent him this first round. And of course, like, the train ride was the focus. And again, it's like showcasing the journey of the story. There's a literal journey. The first one, they had a canoe ride. The second one is the train ride. And then the third one we'll get to in a little bit. But the train was the focus. And again, those details are hard to get perfectly right. Obviously, there's this time period, and the trains looked a certain way back then. So that was the challenge for me, is to find an old-looking train that could work. And I took a similar approach again by zooming out from the image, so those details get a little lost, which is good. And you just get the idea of a train ride. And again, there's the desaturated colors to kind of make it feel older and more of a historical fiction type story. So this first round, I missed the mark. Well, I think that gets to the second round. Well, no, actually, basically, I didn't incorporate the jungle aspect of it that they ride.
Yep.
So a lot of these, it's more plains and flat pieces of land. And that was the thing that I just, now, like, yeah, we start to add that aspect of it to make it more fitting for the story. But the first round, yeah, I didn't include any jungle, and they turned out pretty well, but Gar pointed that out, and that was the big revision to the second round, is including this jungle aspect and still keeping with the train. Here, this is the final version. And again, like, this train gave us some issues, and then are they called trussels?
Mm-hmm.
The tracks. Yeah, so like the train, I added the big triangular steam thing. I forgot what it's called. The kind of chimney thing in the very front. Yeah, so like that was a telltale sign of that type of locomotive back in the day. So I found another script that had that, and I added it to this train. I tried to make the cars era accurate, which they might not be 100%, but again, I want to give you the impression of what this is. And then the little detail touch are the men that stand on top of the cars, the train cars. as it's going, and they are armed with shotguns and weapons to make sure everything stays in line. It's all part of the story. Yeah, so they're tiny, but like if you zoom in, you can actually see the silhouette, and they're holding a gun. So that was a nice little detail that people might overlook, but it's there, and it's kind of like a little hidden surprise. And then again, much like Widow Walk, it's kind of a horizon. You have a foreground of foliage, that middle ground, and then like a kind of ominous sky. And here, rather than a beautiful sunset, you have the kind of dark, stormy clouds. And then you also have the map in the back. So I took a lot of the same elements and repurposed them and did them slightly different and fit it to this book. So they look similar, yet they're different. And that's what I want. If you took the different title and you like put them next to each other, I want you to be able to know immediately that they're part of the same series.
Mm-hmm.
It's very much like Panama, by the way.
Yeah.
It reminds me very much of Panama.
Mm-hmm.
And then the medallion, Randy built out the repoussé sculptural aspects of the medallion as well. So that it looks like a copper.
Yeah, it's great.
Nice. Okay, here's the wraparound.
Yeah, and it changed slightly. I think the colors got a little more desaturated. And on the back image, I believe I used that as a whole different cover option in one of the rounds. I had that type of image of the train where it's even further in the distance. But it worked so well, like it was perfect for the back. So it's kind of like the continuation of this train's journey.
Yep.
The test audience overwhelmingly went for that one, by the way. And it's very evocative. And once again, the questions we would ask these guys, these people who were readers, the ones who had read it, was this capture what the story, the flavor of the story, and the people who hadn't read the book or the advanced reader copies, they were asked, which of these covers would compel you to want to pick up the book?
Right.
The one that overwhelmingly got chosen.
Right.
Good. Well, that brings us to book 3, Fairness of Beasts, which is, as anyone who's watching, who's part of Gar's email audience will know, we recently had some voting on that and just came to a decision. And so I don't have as much of the sketches or the background of the story on this one, but I can say that this is where we've landed, or almost landed, so to speak, on the Fairness of Beasts. And you can see, how it harkens back to the other covers, but I'd be interested to hear too, because once again, it's like a medallion that totally makes sense, but also is distinct from the other books. So maybe let's start there. Randy, where did this design come from?
I think it was my idea to do a medal, but I don't remember, Gar. Was it my idea to do a war medal? I think so, but Gar and I get together on the phone and we just kind of shoot ideas back and forth, and sometimes things just come about. But
Sure.
But I know that I was thinking almost immediately, because this takes place during the Civil War, and I was thinking almost immediately of just a Civil War style medal, because by this point we know that we want to do a disc shape of some kind, because the other 2 books were, and so we know we want to do that. And so thinking about, I think we talked about a coin at one point, and then it just, I just thought, okay, well, a medal is like the perfect shape for this, and then wanted it to be. I know it immediately came to mind, showing, and I'm going to get his name. Is it Thomas Brady, the photographer, the Civil War? That he took was like, I'm sorry?
Matthew Brady.
Matthew Brady. I always get that wrong. but he, he took all of these photographs of the war dead, basically, and I just immediately thought of that imagery in the background, with the Emmy character as the heroine in the middle. But I also wanted it to be not a new shiny metal. Yeah, I thought it should be tarnished and hopefully beat up. Now this is just a sketch. This isn't the final metal. The final one's going to be a little bit more realistic. I still want it to be painterly, but I've been actually building it in some software that I don't normally use, and that's been a little bit of a struggle. But it's coming along, and I just want it to look a little bit more realistic than the sketch, but it's going to have all of those basic elements in there.
Yeah, it turned out great. While I was reading the book, I again knew it was going to be a circular design, and it was fun to think of what that could be, and I knew you were going to do something great, and I thought of the coin idea too, but I couldn't think of the metal, and the metal is actually the better choice. So I love that it turned out to be the metal.
Nice.
Thanks.
Yeah, and then at that point I did the same type of process again, and it's always fun. I think each of these in the series kind of got a little more refined and more detail oriented. Widow Walk, you're more of a beautiful image landscape, and then book 2 you're a little more zoomed in. You can see some more detail with the train. And then here, you're even more zoomed in. You're still pulled out a lot, but kind of get closer and closer to these characters. So I can show you some of the things. And this is still fresh, like we haven't completely finalized it. But Scott, if you want to...
Yeah, I'll give it back to you.
And I'll switch over. So again, I read the book, and whenever I'm reading it, I always liked the idea of depicting a scene from the book. And to me, there's a moment where Emmy is taking off in the middle of the night, sneaking out with a character she met named LeBeau. And they are sneaking out on horseback, and it's like midnight, and there's a full moon. And to me, I envisioned the beautiful scene of that. And that was kind of what stood out to me as like my first good idea. And I can still see that. And it's funny when you have these ideas, they eventually evolve into something slightly different. To me, I can still visualize this beautiful kind of night shot with a full moon and light shining down from the moon on the characters as they like escape on horseback. I can see it, but then to actually piece that together is more challenging. Like it's easier said than done. So as I was doing that, it evolved to a daytime shot of that. And I think being a nighttime shot would probably make it hard to see details, and like it would have to be just right. So I eventually did a daytime version of it, but part of that process is let me switch over here. Is the image research, and since I just kind of did that recently, this is a collection of all the images I pulled. And what I do when I do image research, I will look on these sites. I'll type in a keyword, and I'll just go page by page. If I see something, an image that could work, I open it up in a new tab and I save the low-res version of it. And I'll just save it. If there's potential, I'll save it, because if you go 50 pages before and you're like, man, I couldn't find anything better than that, it's hard to backtrack and find that image. So I find it's better just to like save it to be safe. So basically, I had the idea of the horse escaping on horseback, and I wanted Emmy, a female character, riding the horse, and along with a male horse rider. So I just found different images of women on horses, and I wanted an action shot where the horse is in full gallop, and the woman having like the wind blow through her hair and dress. If I could find that, and I have this idea of what I want, and then it's a matter of seeking that out. And a lot of the times you're not going to find that perfect vision that you have. So that's the fun part and challenging part. So I had some good images to start it with. And then again, I had like some nice skies, some fields, hay bales in the field, some cannons. And that's one thing, like as I started piecing the comps together, you need some other details to tell more of the setting. It being a Civil War piece, cannons were the perfect solution, I felt. So like I added some of that. And that's kind of where I landed on my first initial vision. And then when I talked to Gar, he brought up the idea of a fire in the distance and two riders not in gallop, but actually looking over a valley into this fire in the distance. And I immediately envisioned that. And I love when authors provide ideas that are really good, because that is just one idea that I already have in my bag that I can go to and just like, you know, work off of. So that's what happened with that. And then I ended up once I showed the low res versions of the comps that were sent out in the email, we kind of narrowed in on the bonfire idea because it turned out really well. And I had some different options for the sky. So basically, once we decided to lock in on that, my process is I purchased these images that I used to create it. So the comps that I sent out, we're not going to buy this photography for comp purposes. It's more to like give you the idea. And once we decide on a cover, then we go ahead and buy the licensing rights for these. So that's what I did here. And these, you know, 9-10 photographs were used in compiling the actual one image you see as the front cover. And that's the fun part. So I pretty much recreate it using the high res images. And that's where I get into the nitty gritty details and make everything just right and try to make it blend in seamlessly, which is very challenging. I'm never convinced that is as perfect as it can be. But again, you want that impression to come across that you know what you're seeing, and hopefully it's intriguing for you to pick up the book and buy it and read it. So yeah, it's more of a blending of these different images, and this is the latest version with the high-res images, which Gar hasn't seen yet, I don't believe. But this is what it is now with all the high-res images. Of course, the medallion is going to be replaced, but everything else is high-res and in place. And that's kind of the thing where I'll still look at it, and there's always something. It's like you never are completely finished. You have to abandon it at a point and just like accept it as being finished. But since we hadn't pubbed yet and I haven't gotten them down, I can still like go back and look at it and see little things I want to tweak and change. But for the most part, I'm really happy with it. And of course, some revisions along the way were the type. I had the word fairness in the same scripty font that the word of is in. And it looked really nice, I thought. And I knew that it was breaking away from having it all of that same font. But I think it like differentiated it a little bit, but still kept it in the same vein. But ultimately, we decided just to make it all the same font as the other ones are. And it turned out great. So I was happy with that decision. But yeah, that's it for the most part.
Nice. And was it that simple? You decided to keep the same font in the fairness just for continuity between books?
That was the obvious choice. I always like exploring other options if they sound like they could work. And again, it did work. It looked fine, but it was just making that decision. And that's what I feel like what's fun about design. There's always some other version or variation, and a lot of them will work really well also. So it's a matter of just deciding between what works best.
Got it.
Yeah. But again, you can see that diamond pattern. And while this story isn't necessarily Native American focused by any means, there's still like a character from that. But it just became an a common thread to have that throughout, because it's almost like a logo at that point, like you expect it. And it doesn't take away, it's not overly Native American or anything, but it still works in my opinion.
Yeah. Gar, anything you want to talk about with that cover? I know this one in our email poll won by a 2-to-1 margin. So this is not only it seems to be the favorite all around, which I think is pretty great.
Yeah.
I think that the interesting thing about it is that one version that Neil did showed the horses rushing as they're galloping, which of course is one of the scenes as Emmy is leaving the peninsula with Penn Bassiter. But this one, to me, one of the reviewers who read the book commented after seeing this that it reminded him of, and he was an English PhD. It reminded him of Dante being guided by Virgil as down into hell, getting ready for the journey. And I thought that was, I thought Neil picked that up very, very nicely conceptually in terms of what we're trying to talk about here, which is all the damage of war as Emmy is on yet another journey. So
I love hearing people's interpretations. Like, everyone has a strong opinion, and it's great. And I love it when it's positive, of course, but like, it's great to hear that, because I didn't directly like intend for that to happen, but I love when people that can happen. And I definitely see that and agree with it.
So I think this is absolutely gorgeous, and I love the medallion too. I think it's just really just right on.
Yeah, it turned out great. Well, that's pretty much it, I think.
Scotty,
I think he's frozen.
I think you're frozen, Scott. He's frozen with a very serious look on his face.
He is frozen.
Well, probably that Scott will need to wrap this up then.
Maybe he'll come back.
Yeah.
This is his meeting. I didn't know you could do that.
Well, it's really neat to see you two guys in the flesh, so to speak, the virtual flesh, and to finally get a chance to hear your thoughts on all the film process.
Of course, we have the technology to do it all the time. But.
Yeah. And this is a great team. I really love working with you guys. So
yeah, I love working with you too.
Likewise. I love the opportunity. Just working on a novel is great for me, because we do business books a lot here at my company. So it's always refreshing to get that novel every once in a while. And like, that's where a designer can like really be creative and let that different type of talent shine. So,
well, hopefully Scott's recording this still as we're talking here, but I just want to put in a plug for you two guys. Randy works as an independent contractor, and Neil, you're working through Greenleaf, but Greenleaf was very willing to allow me to contract with them for your services, and let's ask Scott to post your contact information. I think there'll be a lot of writers who are going to be very interested in all of this, because covers sell books. If somebody walks by and there's not a compelling cover, it's less likely you're going to pick up the book. And then if the cover doesn't do justice to what's inside of the book, then that's a disappointment as well. So in this circumstance, my feeling about working with you guys is that you put your finger right on the key themes. The work is compelling and it's beautiful, and I just love the process. This is wonderful.
Great.
So,
Thank
cool.
you.
Awesome. Well, it has been fantastic talking with all of you and hearing about the details of the process and how things come together. So looking forward to seeing, print versions holding the fairness of beasts. And then now I'm fascinated by what you come up with for the next couple.
Okay.
All right, Gar, Neil, Randy, thank you all very, very much, and look forward to talking to you all again.
All right.
Thanks. Pleasure. Bye.
All right. Bye.